Level 1. The Prophecy of a Conqueror. One day, you will stand before the holiest city on earth and bring an entire civilization to its knees. One day, kings will beg for your mercy. Crusaders will weep at your feet, and the world will hold its breath waiting for your next move. But right now, in the year 1137, you are nothing. You are a cry in the dark, a newborn in Tikrit, born on the very night your family is forced to flee their home forever. Your father, Najm ad-Din Ayyub, packs everything he owns and leaves before dawn. He calls your birth an omen. He doesn't know yet whether it's a curse or a blessing. You are born into exile, into movement, into a world that already has no place for you, but something is already different about you, something no one can name yet. And the road your father walks tonight leads straight to your destiny. Level 2. The Shadow of Greater Men. You grow up in Baalbek, then Damascus, always in the shadow of powerful men. Your uncle, Shirkuh, is a general, a warrior, a force of nature wrapped in iron and ambition. He fills every room he enters. You watch him constantly. You are quiet, studious, more drawn to theology and poetry than to swords. The other boys train for war. You train your mind, but your father reminds you every day, the world is not kind to soft men. The Crusaders hold Jerusalem. They have held it for 50 years. Christian fortresses scar the coastline of the Muslim world like open wounds. You feel it, even as a child, a low burning in your chest that you cannot explain. You are not ready yet. You know that, but something inside you refuses to stay small forever. Level 3. The Education of a Soldier. Your uncle Shirkuh decides your comfort ends now. He pulls you into military life the way a man throws a boy into deep water. Sink or swim, learn or disappear. You learn. You study warfare under men who have bled for every lesson they teach. You memorize terrain, supply lines, the psychology of fear. You discover something shocking about yourself. You are calm in chaos. While others panic, your mind becomes still, clear, precise. But your education isn't only military. You study the Quran deeply. You sit with scholars. You begin to understand that the greatest leaders in history were never just warriors. They were men who made people believe in something. You are starting to believe in something too. You just don't know how far that belief will take you. Not yet. Level 4. The Campaigns of Egypt. Your uncle Shirkuh receives orders that will change your life forever. Egypt is in chaos. The Fatimid Caliphate is crumbling from the inside. Multiple factions are fighting for control, and the Crusaders, always watching, always hungry, are circling. Nur ad-Din, the great Syrian ruler you serve, sends Shirkuh to intervene. And Shirkuh brings you. You are in your 20s. This is your first real war. Egypt is nothing like you imagined. The Nile stretches wider than belief. The cities pulse with a heat and density that overwhelms you. And the political web, Fatimid caliphs, treacherous viziers, Crusader alliances shifting by the week, is almost impossible to navigate. But you navigate it. You fight in 3 separate campaigns across Egypt. You watch your uncle maneuver armies like chess pieces. You begin doing the same. And when your uncle finally secures Egypt for Nur ad-Din, he names you his deputy. You are now the second most powerful man in the wealthiest country in the Islamic world. You are just getting started. Level 5. The Weight of Egypt. Then everything changes in a single moment. Your uncle Shirkuh dies. 2 months after his greatest triumph, his heart simply stops, and every eye in Egypt turns to you. You are 31 years old. You have never ruled anything. The Fatimid Caliph in Cairo views you as a foreign intruder. Your own men question whether you have the force to hold what Shirkuh won. Nur ad-Din watches from Damascus. Unsure whether to trust you with this prize, you feel the weight of it physically, like a stone placed directly on your chest. But you make a decision that shocks everyone. You consolidate power quietly, methodically. You replace Fatimid generals with your own men, slowly, carefully, so no one sees the pattern until it's already done. You abolish the Shia Friday prayer in Cairo and restore Sunni worship, signaling your loyalty to the greater Islamic world without firing a single shot. You are learning the most dangerous skill in the world, how to take power from people who don't realize they're losing it. Nur ad-Din grows nervous. He knows what you're becoming. So does the rest of the world. Level 6. The Lion. Without a leash, Nur ad-Din is dying, and your relationship with him has become something complicated and tense. He suspects you're building an empire of your own inside Egypt. He's right, you are. He sends orders, you delay, you find reasons, you write respectful letters while doing exactly what you plan to do. You are not a rebel. You still call yourself his loyal servant, but you both know the truth. When Nur ad-Din dies in 1174, the Islamic world fragments overnight. Syria falls into a succession crisis. Egypt is already yours. The moment is terrifying and perfect. You move. You march into Syria not as a conqueror but as a protector, a guardian of Nur ad-Din's young son, a servant of stability and unity, By the time anyone realizes what you've actually done, it's already done. Syria is yours. You are no longer a general, no longer a deputy, no longer anyone's servant. You are Saladin, Sultan of Egypt and Syria, and the Crusaders have just run out of time. Level 7. The Holy War. You spend years doing what no Muslim ruler has managed for nearly a century. You unite the Islamic world, not through pure force, through something more powerful. Through a shared purpose, you call it jihad, but you mean something deeper than war. You mean a people remembering who they are. You fund it personally. You give away so much of your own treasury that when accountants check your records, they find you died with less than 50 dirhams to your name. But money was never what drove you. The Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem has controlled the Holy City for 88 years. 88 years of Muslim humiliation, locked gates, and desecrated mosques. In 1187, you make your move. At the Battle of Hattin, you trap the entire Crusader army on a waterless plateau in July heat. You cut off their retreat. You let thirst do what arrows couldn't. It is one of the most devastating military victories in medieval history. The Crusader kingdom collapses like a structure with no foundation. And on October 2nd, 1187, you ride into Jerusalem. No massacre, no rivers of blood. You order restraint. You ransom civilians. You let Christian priests continue their worship. The Islamic world erupts in praise. The Christian world erupts in horror. In Europe, they call it a catastrophe. They call for a third crusade, and the greatest king in Christendom begins to sharpen his sword. Level 8, the king. Across the sea, his name is Richard I of England. They call him the Lionheart, and he is unlike anyone you have ever faced. Richard arrives in the Holy Land in 1191 with a fleet, an army, and a fury that reshapes the entire war in weeks. He retakes Acre, he massacres Muslim prisoners, 2,700 men. In an act so brutal it haunts the war from that point forward. You face each other across a battlefield that neither of you can quite win. Richard advances, you retreat and regroup, you attack his supply lines, he adapts, you nearly break his army at Arsuf. He stabilizes and pushes back, you are matched. Perfectly, maddeningly matched. You never meet face to face, but you exchange messages. You send him fruit and ice when he falls ill with fever. He sends his admiration back. You are enemies who genuinely respect each other, and the war between you feels almost like a conversation. Neither of you can finish. Richard reaches the walls of Jerusalem. Twice, both times, he turns back. He knows he cannot hold it even if he takes it. In 1192, you sign the Treaty of Jaffa. Jerusalem stays Muslim. Christian pilgrims gain the right to visit freely. Neither of you wins, neither of you loses, but you held Jerusalem, and Richard sails home, leaving you standing on the land you never surrendered. Level 9. The cost of everything. The war is over, and you are exhausted in a way that has no cure. Decades of campaigning have broken your body down, piece by piece. You have spent so much of yourself, of your treasury, of your time, that there is almost nothing left to spend. You return to Damascus. You ride out to greet pilgrims returning from Hajj. You smile. You give. You listen to petitions. You are still the ruler, still the symbol, but your physicians see what your people cannot. You begin running fevers in February of 1193. Within days, you cannot rise from bed. The fevers come and go and come back worse. Your body, which carried you from Tikrit to Jerusalem and back again, is finally done. 12 days after the fever takes hold, you slip into unconsciousness. You are 55 years old. You have ruled for 20 years. You have united a fractured world. You have taken and held the holiest city on earth. You have faced the greatest Crusader army ever assembled and not broken. And when they count your possessions after you are gone, there is barely enough money to pay for your burial. You gave everything, absolutely everything. Level 10. What history remembers. They carry you through the streets of Damascus and the city weeps. Not because you commanded them to, not because it was required, but because something real had passed from the world, and everyone who stood there could feel it. Your enemies mourned you. Richard of England, they say, wept when he heard the news. The Crusader chronicles described you with more honor than they gave their own kings. You built no monuments to yourself. You left no treasure. You carved your name into nothing made of stone, and yet, 800 years later, the world still knows your name. You proved that power without mercy is just violence. You proved that a fractured people could be made whole again by a single leader, willing to sacrifice his comfort, his wealth, and ultimately his life for something greater than himself. You never sought to destroy your enemies. You sought to outlast them, to outthink them, to make them face something they had never encountered before, a conqueror who showed restraint when he could have shown fire, from a night of exile in Tikrit to the gates of Jerusalem, from a child born into nothing to a name that echoes across centuries. This is how history remembers you, not as a king who took everything, but as the man who gave everything away and still changed the world forever.